In the days when elders settled disputes beneath the wide, gnarled branches of the Udala tree, speaking slowly and weighing each word as if it carried the voice of the ancestors, and when children learned wisdom, not from books, but from the rhythmic cadence of stories told under the silver glow of the moon, there lived a young girl, whose name the village rarely spoke with kindness, a child whose presence was met with whispers rather than smiles, whose life seemed to carry the weight of sorrow too heavy for her years. Her name was Nkiru, and though she bore it quietly, it held a meaning of hope that few could yet see in the shadowed life she endured. She was an orphan. Her parents, Chukwudi and Ifunanya, had died when she was still too young to understand why the world could be so cruel. Her father's laughter had once filled their compound, and her mother's gentle voice had followed her wherever she went. Then sickness came, swift and merciless, and within one season both parents were buried beneath the red earth. The mourning drum sounded, the elders prayed, and life moved on. But Nkiru's world stopped. By custom, she was taken in by her father's elder brother, Okechukwu. Tradition demanded it, but love did not follow. Okechukwu had a wife, Mama Nwanibuife, a woman with a sharp tongue and a heart hardened by bitterness. She had one daughter, Uju, and 3 sons, Obina, Chibuzo, and Ifeanyi. From the day Nkiru crossed the threshold of that house, her suffering began. She was not given a mat of her own. She slept near the hearth, breathing smoke and ash. She woke before the rooster crowed and slept long after the moon had climbed the sky. She fetched water from the stream, swept the compound until her back ached, cooked meals she was rarely allowed to eat, and carried burdens heavier than her thin body should have known. Uju mocked her mercilessly, laughing at her torn clothes and calling her names that cut like knives. Obina and Chibuzo treated her as though she did not belong among the living, barking orders at her and blaming her for every misfortune. Only Ifeanyi, the youngest, watched in silence, his heart heavy with questions he was too afraid to ask. In that house, Nkiru learned that silence was safer than speech. One afternoon during the dry season, when the sun burned fiercely and tempers flared easily, Mama Nwanibuife sent Nkiru into the bush to fetch firewood. Nkiru picked up her basket and obeyed. The forest was strangely quiet that day, as if the birds themselves were holding their breath. As she bent to gather dry branches, 2 men emerged from between the trees. No one heard her cries. No one came to her rescue. The forest swallowed her pain and her fear. When they were gone, they left her broken on the forest floor, her innocence stolen, her body shaking and bleeding. For a long time, she lay there staring at the sky, wondering how pain could be so heavy and yet not kill her. At last she gathered herself. With trembling hands, she filled her basket with firewood and began the long walk home. Every step felt like fire tearing through her body. Tears streamed down her face, but she wiped them away. Crying had never saved her before. When she reached the compound, dusk was falling. Mama Nwanibuife and Uju were waiting. "Where is the firewood?" her stepmother demanded. Nkiru stood before them shaking, her clothes torn and stained with blood. Not once did the woman ask why. Not once did she show concern. When Nkiru finally whispered what had happened, her stepmother laughed coldly. "I don't care," she said. "You brought this upon yourself. Girls who wander invite trouble." Then she raised her voice. "Before I count to 3, go back and bring more firewood." And so Nkiru turned around. She dragged her wounded body back into the forest and returned long after night had fallen. That night, she finished her chores in silence. No one offered her food. No one offered her comfort. When the compound slept, Nkiru slipped away to her parents' graves. She knelt in the dirt, clutching the earth as if it were their hands, and cried until her voice was gone. "Take me," she whispered. "Living is heavier than dying." But the ancestors were silent. Time passed, and pain settled deep inside her like a stone. Then fate, slow but watchful, began to move. One market season, Obina's childhood friend, Emeka, returned from the city to visit his mother. He wore clean clothes and carried stories of tall buildings and distant places. On his way home, he met Obina, and they laughed like boys who had once shared dust and dreams. On the day Emeka was to return to the city, he came to say goodbye. The family was eating when he arrived, but the pot was already empty. The brothers looked at one another. Then Obina turned to Nkiru and spoke sharply. "Give him your food." Obedient as always, Nkiru handed over the bowl she had been served, unaware of the shadow waiting behind the meal. Emeka ate, smiled, and thanked them. As he prepared to leave, he gave each of the brothers some money. They rejoiced. But before he reached the path, Emeka clutched his stomach. A sharp cry tore from his throat as he collapsed to the ground. His body twisted in pain, foam spilling from his mouth. Screams filled the compound. Mama Nwanyibuife rushed out, pretending shock. "What happened?" she demanded. "They say he fell after eating," someone replied. "What did he eat?" she asked quickly. Nkiru spoke softly. "He ate the food you gave me." For a brief moment, fear flashed across Mama Nwanyibuife's face. Then it vanished, replaced by calculation. She raised her voice and cried out, "She poisoned him! She was jealous! My daughter Uju loved him!" The lie spread like wildfire. The case was taken before Eze Madukaku, the king. Nkiru stood alone before the elders. No one defended her. No one spoke of her suffering. The king judged swiftly. She shall die. Nkiru was taken deep into the forest. A pit was dug. She was placed inside and buried alive, earth packed around her body, leaving only her head exposed to the sky. Then they left her there to wait for death. But truth has a way of breathing. That night, Ifeani could not sleep. Sleep fled from him like a frightened bird, chased away by the weight pressing on his chest. Each time he closed his eyes, memories rose like accusing spirits, the small gourd of poison his mother had hidden away, the way her hands had trembled as she spoke lies, and the many nights he had watched Nkiru suffer in silence, her tears swallowed before they could fall, her pain carried alone. Guilt gnawed at him until his heart could bear no more. When the forest grew quiet and the village sank into uneasy slumber, he took a shovel from behind the hut and ran, faster than he had ever run before, his feet barely touching the ground as fear and love drove him forward. He dug with desperate hands, tearing through soil and roots, ignoring the blisters, the bleeding, the burning pain in his arms, until at last the earth released her trembling body, cold and weak but still alive, as though life itself had refused to let her go. He carried her through the darkness and hid her near the old iroko tree at the edge of the village, a place the elders said was watched by spirits older than memory. There, in silence and secrecy, he washed the dirt and blood from her wounds, wrapped her in clean cloth, and fed her small portions of food and water, whispering apologies he had never before found the courage to speak. Each day he returned when no one watched, guarding her life as carefully as one guards a fragile flame in the wind. When Mama Emeka arrived to claim her son's body, grief sat heavily on her shoulders, but truth travelled with her. Among the belongings she carried was a letter Emeka had written before his journey, its edges worn from handling. When it was read before the elders, the village fell into stunned silence, for in it Emeka spoke not of Uju, as the accusations had claimed, but of Nkiru, of her quiet strength, her gentleness, the suffering he had seen written in her eyes, and his unfulfilled wish to help her escape the cruelty of that house and begin a life where her name would be spoken with kindness. The words struck the village like thunder, and the lie that had buried Nkiru began at last to crack. The king was summoned again, his palace stirred by murmurs that refused to be silenced, and before the gathered elders and the watching spirits of the land, the pit in the forest was uncovered, its damp earth pulled away until Nkiru was found alive, weak but breathing, her eyes open beneath the sky that had once been denied her. Shock rippled through the village like Harmattan wind through dry leaves, and in that moment, Mama Nwanyibwife's carefully woven lies collapsed under the weight of truth. Her voice trembled, her pride shattered, and before the king she confessed to her cruelty, her false accusations, and the poison of hatred she had fed the household for years. Judgment came swiftly and without mercy. She was banished from the land, forbidden to step upon its soil again, her name erased from village prayers and ancestral libations, spoken no more beneath the Udala tree where justice was once denied. The lands that had belonged to Nkiru's parents were returned to her, the boundaries marked anew before witnesses, and Ifeanyi, whose courage had wrestled life from death, was honoured before the elders, his name praised as one who chose truth over fear. In time, seasons passed and wounds slowly healed, and Nkiru grew into a woman the village came to know as Mama Nkiru, a mother not only by blood but by choice, who opened her home to abandoned and broken children, fed them with gentleness, and taught them that suffering does not cancel destiny, but refines it. At night, beneath the same moon that once watched her tears, she would gather them close and tell them her story, her voice steady and warm, and she would always end with tea. If this story moved you, subscribe for more, share to help amplify voices like Nkiru's, and comment below with your thoughts or reflections. Your engagement keeps stories like this alive.